Hey, this is Notser, and this is the Tier 9 German destroyer Z-46. She has 19,900 health, a top speed of 37.5 knots, 6 128mm guns, 8 torpedoes, a surface detect of 5.9 kilometers, and 48 AA defense rating. For my modules, reduced crit chance on main armament, improved aiming accuracy, improved torpedo rearm, reduce the chance of flood and fire, improved acceleration, concealment. For my commander, basic firing training, faster torpedo rearm, last stand, superintendent, advanced firing training, and concealment again. We are on the map Estuary, and we're top tier. This is going to be fun. It's always enjoyable to be very powerful, and I think the German destroyers are very powerful. There are weaknesses. They are larger than average. The AP is going to get stuck in you more, but honestly, it's only a couple scenarios where I see that happening. I see an enemy Kiev, as the Russians say, and Kiev, as everyone else says. And I'm going to engage him with my HE, and I decide to switch to AP since he's perfectly broadside. The AP, in my opinion, after playing this game and after trying to improve, it's probably better to use AP when it is a broadside target, just period. Yes, HE is pretty good, but AP is better against the broadside. And my torpedoes, they make contact with the Mogami. And of course, the trifecta, we run into the island. We can't actually do anything without running into islands, it seems. My torpedoes are almost back up. I'm a little worried about this line. It doesn't really seem like they have a lot of weaknesses. Concealment, just as good as the Americans or the Japanese. Torpedo systems, just as good as the Japanese, just as good as the Americans. It has hydroacoustic as a bonus. It doesn't have to sacrifice anything. Its AA defense is very impressive at tier 9. Of course, the enemy Mogami's dead. How could he not die? Enemy Kiev is in the area, and of course I'm going to fire my gun after he left the safety of his smoke. I'm just going to be angled and firing at him, trying to avoid as many shots. He is showing a perfect broadside, and the AP is overpinning, but it's doing about as much damage as I usually do. And if we get lucky, we got a ricochet. Switch to HE, Notser, and that's what I do. I felt like he was going to send torpedoes, so I used hydroacoustic preemptively to protect myself, and it looks like I might be able to outrun it. It's going to be close. I chose to use boost, and I needed every bit. Is it going to be enough? Oh, so close. I needed every bit of that boost to avoid the torpedoes. I just don't see the real weakness. The gun systems have better velocity, at least it feels like it, than the Americans. You can get by using advanced firing training for that extra range, and I think that's what I'm going to commit to. That's part of the reason why I don't like the 150mm guns. They don't benefit from basic firing training. Advanced firing training, expert marksman, is basically worthless. It gives you maybe 1 or 2 seconds faster turret traverse. You are sacrificing a lot of key skills to use the 150mm guns. And maybe I didn't make that completely relevant because, honestly, my Z-46, I believe it's Z-26 or Z-23. Z-26 is like a car or something. The Z-23 was from day 1 when I got the ship. And that was like 3 weeks ago. So, the enemy destroyer, the enemy Soviet destroyer, the Kiev, moved back. I'm going to engage the Fletcher and give ground. Most of my damage is facing reverse. So, it's not a big deal that I'm retreating. This is sort of like an American or a Soviet moving forward. And I just want to make sure there's no island in the way. That would be really, really bad. It's very hard for him to hit me, but it's very easy for me to hit him. So I'm really working through the build. I realize that today is the day in North America, and tomorrow, I believe, for the Brits, or for the European server, and the Brits, of course, they're a part of the European server, but I believe today is the day that you guys are going to be introduced to the German destroyers, and it's very fun. It's a very enjoyable line, but I just feel like they might have a little bit too much good Their smoke is supposed to be very weak. But there's so many people with smoke now, between the cruisers and the destroyers, you can benefit from other people's smoke far more than you've ever been able to. And hydroacoustic basically counters every single smoke cloud that you could potentially run into. So for the price of a weaker smoke, you can take out anyone who might hurt you in your smoke or right outside of your smoke. It doesn't really feel that bad. I have sustained a lot of damage, and I don't want to sustain any more. The game is just starting. So I gave ground. I am protected from the Fletcher. He decided to use a smoke, which is great. What a waste. And now I'm looking for a possible target. There is something capturing D right now, and it's probably one of the 4 destroyers that is in the game right now for the enemy team. What would you do as a destroyer? Well, generally, I would look to counter enemy destroyers. I don't have a lot of health. I would also like to get in range to send my torpedoes. 10 kilometers is pretty good. It's not bad. The upgrade path is very fair for the Germans. You gain about a kilometer or half a kilometer, a little bit of speed, a little bit of damage. There doesn't really feel like a downside to upgrading your torpedo systems. Everything feels essential in the German destroyer line when you're upgrading. The hull is going to give you better AA protection, better rudder shift. The rudder is a little sluggish without the upgraded hulls. The stock variant of all the Germans is a little difficult to use. Some of the turrets traverse extremely slow. Thankfully, this is not one of them. Tiers 9 and 10 traverse extremely fast. Absolutely no reason to have expert marksman at tier 9 and 10. I think it's 10 seconds and 8 seconds for the 9 and 10. I mean, that's US destroyer speed. That's the best in the game, as far as I'm concerned. The C point is under cap, and it just got captured by an enemy, probably a destroyer, since the battleship does not see them. I sent torpedoes at the Missouri, hoping to hit it. Of course, we don't hit the Missouri, but you don't hit if you don't send, right? Keep that motto up, Notser. And it's an Akatsuki. And the Akatsuki is moving away. We are barely outside of detection for our ship. And I'm going to try my best to stay within detection for his ship. And I'm sure he's so frustrated. Why can't I see the target that is detecting me? And it looks like, yes, the enemy destroyer, the enemy Kiev, the one that we were trying to engage, is firing his guns. And he looks like he's going to get away. We do hit him. We hit him barely. Not enough to kill. Friendlies have taken out the engine on the enemy destroyer, and he's popping his smoke, trying to hide. Well, we're Germans, so what do Germans do really, really well, other than drink beer and eat a lot of bratwurst? They push the smoke very, very quickly with hydroacoustic. I am not afraid at all. There is absolutely no way that a torpedo is going to just magically hit me. I have so much protection from doing just this. If the enemy cruiser chose to use his radar, that would be one thing. That's kind of dangerous, looking back on it. But he's behind the island. He had to bail out. I'm in a position where I only have one enemy who can engage me, and he's broadside, so I'm going to fire AP. And yes, we are overpinning. But if we can get the engine block, we're going to do massive damage. And there we go, 4,000. We knock out his engine, we take him out. It's worth it. The AP basically does the exact same damage that HE does, even when it overpins. And if it doesn't overpin, it's an extreme increase in damage. Obviously, AP against cruisers and battleships, because it's not going to overpin. If they're broadside, that's the way to go. But even destroyers, if you can find that sweet spot where one shell doesn't overpin, you will just out-damage your HE salvo. You only really want to use HE against an angled target, or you're seeking to set the target on fire. Maybe use up his damage control. Maybe you have a torpedo incoming and you want to bait out the damage control usage, so the torpedo hits the target and causes a flood. That's the ideal use of HE for the Germans. Otherwise, AP, baby. Now, I have my torpedoes. They're reloaded. I'm not in range of the enemy. I was honestly, potentially, looking for the destroyer. I felt like it was an obvious play to try and torpedo my flank, maybe harass it. I would try and finish me off if I knew I existed somewhere in this area. He could be afraid of the cruisers and the battleship near me, but he could also expect that I'm going to overextend, maybe kill myself. Nobody ever shows up. I'm going to just fire my guns at the enemies on the other side of this island. And initially I had AP loaded. I just want to see how well it worked against an angled target. What's the worst that can happen? It does nothing, and I'm not risking the ship because there's nobody in line of sight to detect it. I do think advanced firing training is probably the way to go. And if you go advanced firing training, you want to go basic firing training, you want to try and enhance the 128s. That's a huge advantage, of course, having extra range on the 128 versus the 150. That's where I'm leaning on the Tier 8 and the Tier 6. We will, of course, explore the 150mm guns, but it's not that hard to do damage in these things. This is probably... This is not an easy shot. I would say it would be a much harder shot if it was a US destroyer trying to do this. The Germans, they do feel closer to the Soviets than the Americans at gun range effectiveness. Enemy Baltimore is potentially showing a side. I'm going to try and slide it right in there at the waterline, hoping for a citadel. We can only dream, right? We don't get a citadel, but we do get 2,200 points of damage done. He's right at his maximum range for radar. It is a potential, although I have never seen him actually use radar. Maybe he doesn't have it loaded on the ship. And in fact, I think I do see an aircraft. If I'm not mistaken, I could be just crazy. No, I don't see an aircraft. I expect him to continue the turn and go full broadside. That's why I'm continuing to fire AP. It should be the superior ammo if he does indeed do that, and it looks like he did, and we finish off the target. Nice. Capturing this point, I am detected, and there is nobody within range that should be detecting me. It's the destroyer. Where are you, Mr. Destroyer? I would love to kill you. And I had a feeling. Yep, he's right there. Almost immediately we switch to him. And I'm going to continue to fire AP. He's got broadside. And broadside has a chance for that AP to do really good damage. Yeah, there we go. Regular penetrating shots. More regular penetrating shots. I'm going to melt this guy if we can just keep up this damage. And is this the kill shot? He tries to smoke. It does not work, unfortunately for him. He does sort of block the battleship, but the Fletcher is defeated. Equal tier. It's a much difficult shot for him. If I was a Fletcher and I had to deal with a German, I would try to avoid showing too much of my side. And if I had to show my side, it needs to be really, really angled against the German. But there's not a lot of weaknesses in the German versus the Fletcher to me. Maybe rate of fire. Maybe. It would be difficult. It would be difficult. Now we're detected. I believe this is the Gneisenau. I just barely outranged the Gneisenau's detection though. And I'm going to commence fire on the Missouri, who's showing a perfect broadside. Oh yes, give me the AP damage. 4,000 or 5,000 every 3 seconds. Thank you. Thank you very much. You don't want to show your broadside to a German destroyer. German destroyers are just as effective as Soviet destroyers at AP, maybe even more so. And I don't care. It's a cooldown into the island. Finally we can fire over the island at the Gneisenau. He can't see us. The smoke is about over though. We of course lose sight of him. There's no aircraft in the sky. He hasn't fired his gun. He's behind the island. I can't see him. And I'm in smoke. 4,000. There we go. There's the sweet spot. Yeah, look. The smoke is gone. It lasts for very little time. But it got the job done. I took a quick peek, and yeah, the Colorado died. Can't finish the Gneisenau, but we did pretty good damage to it. Definitely did good damage to the Missouri. So, no medals earned, 3 kills, almost 87,000 points of damage done, 2,532 base XP. We pretty much just played the objective correctly and eliminated all targets who were relevant to it. Most of my damage was an AP. Not surprising considering how much I fired. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.